All right, so we have Nick and Leo, right? So thanks for taking the time to share your story with us. I'm kind of anxious to hear how you guys got into this kind of unconventional musical world that you live in. So you're brothers. Can you kind of take us back and, I don't know who wants to start, but tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Were you in a musical family, or did you kind of inherit the musical thing?
Yeah, people ask us that a lot, if it was a musical family, and yes and no. I mean, our mom used to sing to us all the time, and our dad supposedly played the clarinet and the saxophone, although the only evidence of it was a closet with a clarinet and a saxophone in it. There was a lot of emphasis on imagination for sure in our house. Like, our dad would create these, entire fantasy realms that we would all inhabit for days at a time, sometimes chasing each other around the house, monsters and heroes and the like. And I remember us just even from a very early age, like playing at music, even before we really played music, we'd like invent these zany characters that, like I remember there's like an itinerant ukulele bum or something that we would...
washed up vaudeville ukulele character.
Yeah, so we'd kind of have a backstory, and then we would make up these songs and we'd record them on a cassette recorder, and we'd be banging on an old instrument or something even, but we didn't know how to play it, but we were kind of, already making up stories. Musical stories.
That's neat. Did you guys play Dungeons and Dragons at all? It sounds very like like the fantasy world there.
No, I dabbled as a lonely teenager,
right.
But it never took really.
Okay, so did either of you go to school for music, or how did you both kind of get into the field?
No, not formal school. I mean, I've had for my part, I've had a lot of different teachers and a lot of different styles. I studied with a jazz guitar player. I studied with a classical player and a rock player. But, it's kind of just a process of exploration that leads you to different people and different books. And, of course, now, the vast world of online video instruction and all the information that, it's so much different than it must have been. One of my favorite stories about the Beatles is how John and Paul traveled across town by bus when they were teenagers because they heard of this guy who knew a B7th chord and how to play it. So they made a bus expedition just to learn this one chord. And I just think of what a different world it is now in terms of learning.
And you're a big traveler, right? I got from your website, it seems like you've kind of been all over the place, just kind of exploring the world.
Yeah, the whole travel really ties in with playing music for me, because I'm kind of in it for the stories, the storytelling, songs and stories, and the doors that playing music can open. So, I've done busking trips where I'd play on the street to try to kind of get my next train ticket and my next meal, and, across Europe and the States a number of times.
What are some of the coolest places that you've been?
Transylvania. It's a place that, I wasn't even sure was real until a few years ago, and then I wound up there playing on the street. Playing with a band of gypsies in the Czech Republic.
Okay, how does one end up doing something like that? Like, I can't even fathom how you end up in Transylvania playing music.
It involves, I think it involves a profound lack of planning. Just kind of letting things unfold and being open to suggestions about where to go and how to go. And, if you've kind of got, the more of an itinerary you have, I find, in terms of having booked places to stay or knowing even exactly where you're going, then the less room there is for kind of, fate to put its hand in the door and make things happen.
Yeah. Okay. And Nick, how about you? How did you get involved in music?
I think my music was mostly solitary. I mean, we played in bands together from a young age, but I didn't start any sort of musical training until my late 20s, I would say. I took some drum lessons, and I more recently studied classical guitar. My schooling was in sculpture. I was always at least as much a visual artist as a musician, often more so growing up. And I think the sculpture education led to my wearing my instruments, and I was equal parts interested in putting things together and building things and playing music. So it was that combination that led to what I do.
Okay, so can you just kind of describe for people who don't know, you're a one-man band and you kind of created your own instrument that you travel around with. Yes. Can you explain it a little bit?
I'm a traditional one-man band, so I don't use any sort of electronics or, looping or anything like that. It's all worn on my body and played at the same time through ropes and levers and things like that. I remember putting one single bass drum on my back and thinking I was going to stop there, and deciding that I wasn't going to be one of those gaudy one-man bands that has all kinds of horns and whistles attached to them, but I guess you sort of lose sight of that goalpost once you start doing it for a living. It's difficult to stop now that I've started. I'm on my fifth contraption I've built. So it's basically a drum set worn on my back, and then I play guitar and harmonicas, and I play around with some horns and lung-powered percussion and whistles and things.
So how does that idea kind of enter your brain for the first time that you want to be a one-man band?
I remember when I built my first one, a lot of my friends saying, "Oh, you finally did that." So I must have talked about it for a long time before I did it. But I think it was a very practical decision that I just wanted some percussion involved. I didn't set out to create a big spectacle or anything. I just wanted a little bit of percussion to back myself while I was playing, and I liked the engineering challenge and I liked the aesthetic of wearing it on my back. And yeah, since then it's any novelty or anything is long since worn off. It's all just a series of practical problems. how to make different body parts play more instruments and how to make more sounds.
Oh my gosh! So how has it, I guess, progressed from, you said you've built multiple contraptions, you call them at this point, so from the first one to the one that you have now, how has that progression changed?
They mostly get more comfortable and lighter. The biggest problem is being able to stand up straight and sing while I'm doing it. So my first few had heavier bass drums, and they would sort of double me over, and I would have to play at a very sort of awkward stooped angle. So they're just getting lighter and more comfortable, so I can hopefully age a few, play for a few more years without my body giving out.
And you play around like Central Market and places around Lancaster typically?
I do. I just started venturing out to Central Market again. I'm booked so often now that it's a little bit hard to just show up and play on the streets when I actually have a day off.
Yeah, that's great. So, people book through the website then, or how did they?
They usually actually finding that people have been calling me mostly to book me, but through the website I think too, and through Facebook.
That's awesome. What kind of events do you typically do? Like who calls for a one-man band?
I've done weddings. I do a lot of work for seniors because I ended up playing all these tunes from the 1920s to the 1950s. So the seniors know these songs and really like them. So I'll play a lot of private senior clubs or retirement homes or more like Alzheimer's kind of. I don't know what to call them. They're places where people gather and they do activities and things, like senior centers.
That's great.
And I'd like to play for kids a little bit more, but I've sort of dug this niche with seniors that I'm enjoying.
All right, so we need to get the word out there to the kids.
To come up with some
teachers and parents.
Yeah, I've played at the new school a few times and things like that.
Oh, that's very cool. So, and you're a part of the Vinegar Creek Constituency, right? What do you do in the band?
Yeah, that's kind of been, I guess, my busiest project for a while now. And it's an original roots band, and I'm the singer, songwriter, guitar player.
Okay. And when did that start? How long have you been involved?
I've kind of fudged the dates on that for a long time to make myself feel a little less decrepit in the project. But I guess we're over 10 years now, probably closer to a dozen years since the first time we played together.
Yeah. And people can still find you kind of all around.
Yeah, we play in different configurations with the Vinegar Creek Constituency these days. The full band sometimes when the venue permits, or sometimes just a duo, me and Jeff Bryson, the mandolin player.
And you do solo stuff?
I do a lot of solo stuff, and that's kind of the project that I'm most deeply embedded in right now, is writing what will be my second solo album that I hope to record in the coming year.
Okay. And how would you describe that type of music? Not a one-man band, so is it?
Well, for reference to your readers too, I don't prefer the term half a man band when being compared with my brother. somebody the other day approached me while I was busking, and she said, I didn't recognize you without all your stuff on, which is something that I get a whole lot, because I'm told that there's a family resemblance, and it's hard for me to see that kind of thing, but I imagine it's true. And we both play music, so people often wonder about, and he's been asked if I think how Vinegar Creek's doing, but I said, no, you're thinking of my brother Nick. He's the one-man band. I'm only doing a few, and I've got a little foot tambourine and a harmonica that I played around to fill out my sound as a solo, but it's nothing like what he does, where the suit is actually another element of the art itself. I'm just trying to make more noise. And she said, oh, so you're a half-a-man band. And I said, I take exception to that.
I can't think of a positive way to interpret that.
Yeah. And, I mean, she tipped me, so I think she got caught up in the catchy zing of that title more than anything else, maybe. But yeah, I always kind of try to squirm out of describing things. The last album that Vinegar Creek made, which was last year, was called Amerikinda Sorta, and that was the word that I always use when people would ask us to describe the genre. They'd be like, "Is it bluegrass? Is it folk?" Is it? I'm like, well, all that kind of stuff. Amerikinda, kind of Americana, Amerikinda Sorta. My solo albums have veered more back towards my roots, which is rock and roll. Like when we were growing up, Nick and I were in a lot of bands together. I think it was kind of the same band that went through a number of metamorphoses with most of the same guys, but we'd change from punk to psychedelic to whatever it was. And so I grew up playing and listening to rock and roll, and I really still enjoy playing that style, even though most of my last 10 years have been spent playing acoustic roots music. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the studio with a rock band. You sing and perform differently with a drummer and that kind of force behind you than you do. There's just some other things that it unlocks. Okay. My genres are rock and folk, somewhere on that spectrum.
And Nick, how would you describe? Well, I know it's hard to describe music. But how would you describe your style? Is it, you said, kind of like has a 20s vibe?
I've always referred to it as garage vaudeville.
Okay.
I really like the sort of vaudeville, 1920s. Not so much as a form of pastiche, but every time I learn a song, it seems to happen to be from that era. I think it's just my wheelhouse. Yeah. I like the sort of jazzy and sing-songy kind of stuff.
Do you like the performance aspect of it as well?
I do, yes. There's a kind of a kinetic sculpture aspect to my one-man band, so I always consider it a little bit more related to a variety show kind of act than a straight musical act.
Do you guys ever play together these days, or did that kind of stop when the band?
We do sometimes. We used to play together as under the name the Brothers DiSanto. It's kind of like an electric guitar and drums duo. It did become harder to maintain a repertoire because we're both booked full-time doing what we do, so it was harder to find the time to rehearse and just to have things at the level that we thought they should be to present them. I've even played a few times next to him while he was wearing his one-man band suit, but it just made me feel like the worst kind of slacker. I mean, you're standing there just playing a guitar and a tambourine, and the guy next to you is working that hard. It's like, I felt like people were giving me the stink eye going by, like, why are you letting him carry all the weight? Plus, it kind of, it's kind of an oxymoron to have a two-man, one-man band anyway, so. But we play together for fun when the occasion arises, and there's sometimes we still do a gig together every now and again.
It would turn into a cycle of cramming for material.
Yeah.
We'd have to play a handful of shows a year, so we would be really scrambling to get everything up to speed, and then we'd play a show and not have any other requests for a few months. So it was a little bit more of a hassle.
Okay.
He's played on a few of the Vinegar Creek records too. I've lent some percussion, washboard, or a snare drum, and everything. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely continued to collaborate fairly regularly.
Yeah, is it nice having kind of these commonalities as brothers, so you can share your interest in music?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Whenever I need advice on how I can make something that I can stomp on that'll make noise to accompany myself, I always know that. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to make this thing. What sort of a spring should I use in this thing, or where should I drill the hole? Because we actually were sharing a house for a number of years until pretty recently. So, he'd always be down there working on the suits, and given that we're both full-time musicians, our schedules are pretty similar in a lot of ways.
That's so great that you can both kind of do what you love for a living full time.
Yeah.
That must feel pretty great.
It really does. Yeah. I mean, you got to hustle to to make a living as like a working class. You know, a lot of people don't really think about the existence of working class musicians. It's either kind of like you're famous or you're a hobbyist.
Yeah.
But there's actually that middle ground that we occupy where, you know, we're very busy, but, you know, just as kind of like working class entertainers doing all different sorts of gigs at all different sorts of venues. And it's really fun to see where you'll wind up. For me, that's one of the funnest parts. Is a mandolin player Jeff and I are always saying like how weird's it gonna get, you know? Because you'll show up to some gig, it's like, oh, you just set up over there behind that alpaca, you know, and on that island next to that alpaca. I mean, that's a true story. And it's always just fun to see what kind of places music will take you.
So, talking about where music will take you in the future, you had said you hope that you can do this and make the contraptions later to kind of keep playing for a long time in the future. So is this what you see yourself doing for a long time?
It is. I never would have sort of plotted that course, but it just started to make me more money than any jobs I was doing, and I had to turn down other work so that I could be a one-man band. Go figure. I really love doing it. I'm pretty committed to it. I feel like I've really made a serious study of it. So, as long as my joints hold up, that's what I want to do.
It's probably the coolest job description ever, right? To be a one-man band for like that is awesome.
Best advice I ever got was to carve out a very specific niche for yourself.
Yeah.
Streamline your interests.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would say you have done that. And do you plan on traveling the world anymore and ending up in Transylvania-like places?
Yeah, in fact, I'm kind of increasingly seeking to merge my passion for travel and my wanderlust with the music thing. And I'm kind of exploring now ways to do. I kind of plan to become increasingly nomadic, you know, maybe do the whole camper van build out thing in the near future. Hit the road with my dog, Steinbeck travels with Charlie style. And I'm kind of beginning to practice my video making skills because I recognize that kind of in the digital marketplace these days, it's one of the best formats for getting music and stories out there. You know, I mean, I kind of view myself as being in the same business that you guys are, as telling stories. And people have responded really well to my travel logs when I go out, and I would, you know, kind of blog it, and people would tell me like, "Oh, this is my favorite show." You know, our family gathers around the computer every night to see where you're popping up and what you're doing.